This is Enthusiastic Women, the podcast, season 2, broadcasting from the Enthusiastic Women worldwide headquarters, where every day we birth success. I'm Ms. Shannan, happy to welcome my friends Judy Carter and Samantha Messiah to the table. How you guys doing?
Well.
Yay. Season 2, episode 2. Hooray for us.
Woohoo.
Gotta think. I mean, you have to, just applaud yourself for the small victories, right?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. And so we encourage everybody to be part of our Enthusiastic Women community. Remind you that here is what we do. We are Gen X women and friends. And this podcast, we analyze, discuss, and parody trending topics, pop culture, and insane products. And each episode, we cover 4 topics. The first one is our product displacement segment. That's where we talk about a particular product and their brand and whether their efforts are a hit or a miss. This episode, we've all heard of healthcare for all. Mm-hmm. But what if even our medical tech is racist? We're going to cover that today. Then we're going to move on to our next segment. Did you see this? A new study is out there, and it says that men are funnier than women. We're going to talk about that and see if we agree or disagree. I can give you a little point. We disagree. And then in this episode's Does This Make Me Old? We talk about cancel culture and how it's affecting our teens. And finally, we're going to move on to this edition's closing segment. Today is Excuse Me, Sir. So Judy and I have a list of profile pictures, do's and don'ts. So we're going to help you out with this little enthusiastic woman PSA. That's what we're going to do today. So ladies, are you ready with this episode of Enthusiastic Woman?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, we're going to start with our product displacement segment. Product displacement is brought to you by Enthusiastic Women Online and our Enthusiastic Women's Wellness Line. Today in product displacement, we're going to talk about this new trend that we discovered in medical algorithms, right, Samantha?
Yep, it is. And this is scary. So a new study is out that has revealed that there's rampant racism in decision-making software that's used by U.S. hospitals.
Right.
Basically, the study found that an algorithm that predicts which patients will benefit from extra medical care, so it tells medical practitioners how to allocate medical resources used to treat patients, it dramatically underestimates the health needs of the sickest Black patients.
Right.
Which means that they don't get the medical care they need, and people literally are dying from this.
And I think it's just based upon some initial stories that we had talked about on previous episodes, where we're saying that there already is a bias to white males, partially because they're the ones that created a lot of this tech and the algorithms. They wrote the algorithms.
Yep. Right. There's a lack of awareness of, I guess what you might call the socioeconomic circumstances or data that surrounds the data sets that they're using that to drive the algorithm. Right. And it does. It comes down to, in great part, to the makers of the technology, right, which are primarily white men, especially young white men. This is kind of complicated, but it turns out what was tripping up the algorithm is that even though Black patients on average incur apparently lower medical expenses, they suffer from chronic illnesses at a much higher rate than white patients. Okay. But because the expenses are lower, which is what the algorithm was looking at, the assumption is made by the algorithm that they need less medical care, and so that's what they get.
Got it. Okay.
Do you think, I'm sorry if you were still talking
about
that, but okay, so I was looking into this because the opioid epidemic is largely being suffered by white people because Black people were not prescribed opioids by doctors. And the research that I was finding it was for 2 reasons. One of the big reasons was because Black people tended to be not having as much health insurance, so they weren't coming in and weren't able to get them prescribed. The second reason was because doctors were having a bias that they thought that their Black patients were more likely to have drug addiction, so they weren't giving them opioids, and they were underestimating the fact that Black people had real pain that white people told them. Right. So those things came together, and so white people, more affluent, more money, more health insurance, more access to get the opioids. The doctors were giving them because they thought, oh, this person has more real pain. They're not drug addicts. I'm going to give them all these things combined, which has caused, white people to have this big, huge, epidemic of opioid addiction. But I wonder if this same thing of not having health insurance and not getting, the same bias that happened in the health system for all these reasons affected this algorithm?
I think it's systematic, and I also think it's cultural. So I do think
that
it is
and it went into the tech now, and now it's caused this problem in the algorithm.
I think partially it's back to what Samantha said initially, that the people who were creating the algorithm put in data that was faulty based upon their particular biases.
These wrong
I do
things.
think it's also like, let's look at my mother, who happens to be African American, who does have health insurance, still is under the opinion that until she is dramatically sick, she's not going to go. And that's, I think, a cultural bias that she's created over years, where it's all like, well, if I go in, so she won't go in. So it's one of those things that, until, like, if I go, well, you should just go in for regular health checks. She's like, well, they don't know what they're talking about. They're just going to tell me to go home. They're not going to, they're so. And she is.
She might be right.
Right. And so that's her general.
Kind of a circle of.
Correct. So that's her experience.
And then the lower medical costs.
Right.
It's all,
because they don't bother to go in.
It's all baked in.
So until she goes, so she is more likely, like if she has, some chest congestion, instead of going in and having them diagnose her, she'll wait until it's bronchitis, basically. So it does cost more because, and then also I think what she's already decided is, if I go in too soon, they're going to not be able to diagnose me anyway. So she waits until it's traumatic, and then she has to go into urgent care because it's, well, instead of going in when maybe they could have given you some in-home treatment and a nebulizer, now you have to go and check yourself into urgent care. So of course it costs more because it's urgent care. Yeah. So I think it's just the society has created the system that, underinsured patients and just particular biases have been around in the system for so long. But I'm not surprised that the algorithm is wrong, because we've found this isn't the first story where we talked about there's been a bias based upon these type of things, where we've talked before about how tech can't recognize black women and tech can't this, because the people who are creating the algorithm are like, whoops, missed that.
It's a double whammy of the people who are, and like I said, we've talked about this before too. All the people who are in tech tend to be the same person, and that's going to be really hard to change.
Right. It's a manifestation of whoever builds it.
Correct.
It's but this isn't just a manifestation of who builds it. This is a manifestation of who's building it, and a manifestation of the data. And do you hear what I'm saying?
And it's difficult.
It's who's building it, and it's a fact that this population is underrepresented by insurance and neglected by the providers.
And they do a terrible job when they do try to get all of the data in, because they come at it from the shady side angle. Because it's the same thing as they go, well, we don't have enough data on the genetics of minorities. So let's try and convince them to go in and do 23andMe and Ancestry.com, and then Ancestry.com botches it, and so we're like, well, I'm not giving you my DNA. You can't. What's that ad? And so when they do talk about it, like right now, there's a particular study that's going on, and it's been going on for a while. But one of our universities here in the Twin Cities really works on getting genetic information about kids and families that have kids on the autism spectrum, so they could do all these things. And they have been asking me to do this study. And I'm like, okay, I can see why they want all of this information, because how are they going to make, if they don't get enough families to be involved in this study, you're not going to get the data you need to make any strides. But I'm also super suspicious anytime somebody wants my genetic information.
Sure. And that's, I'm sorry to talk about that. The proprietary nature of data is another piece of this, because the healthcare companies are so competitive that if somebody wants to do a study like this one, they won't necessarily give up the data that they have for it to be analyzed, because they're competing with each other.
Right. So I think I'm really glad that this study came to light. I like it anytime one of these things is showcased, because I do think that that's how you start to go, okay, let's do a better job of answering the questions. And I also think of asking the right questions. But I also think that it's good because a lot of times when you're in one of those marginalized community, when you say something like this, then people go, you're just making it up. They act like you don't have a valid point, and that's not really the reality. So it's good to go, nope, here's actual facts that say, no, I really have been discriminated against, even by this algorithm. It happens all the time. So I'm glad that the story existed and that it broke, and thank goodness I have health insurance, and now I know to press more. Gotta continue to press. That has been today's product displacement. Again, product displacement brought to you by the Enthusiastic Woman Online Network. Remember, you should always check that out. And today, here's our Enthusiastic Woman Certified Wellness Coach, Sandy Waters.
Hi, I'm Sandy Waters. I deal in wellness, and I have a deal for you. As an expert in women's health, I keep my ear to the ground. And there's one thing I hear from women all the time. I wish I had the strength and the intelligence of an African bush elephant. Sounds familiar, right? That's why I created my dietary super supplement, Brain Fire. It's made from natural ingredients, things you find in the earth or whatever. The point is, if you're a woman and you potentially need to move fast, you need Brain Fire. It comes in a convenient powder. Just add it to whatever you're drinking. Stir. When it turns neon orange, it's time to take a sip. When the inside of your head starts to tingle, you know it's working. Brain Fire. For the enthusiastic user in all of us.
Brought to you by Enthusiastic Woman Online. We birth success.
There's nothing I like better than when my brain is tingling.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. You know what? I miss that when it's not tingling. You just want that feeling again.
I wish I could have it all the time.
We all want to be African bush elephants.
My favorite.
My favorite animal.
Yes.
So elegant.
In this edition of Did You See This? Now, I have this study. I sent the study out to my friends Judy and Samantha. And so here's the study. It's a study, and here's the gaslighty,
Yes.
the gaslighty
Yes.
Headline that I shared with both of you. Men are funnier than women, study claims. So, of course, so this study was conducted by a university in Wales along with the University of North Carolina, and they analyzed 28 studies that looked at how funny around 5,000 people were. I like the way that they said in the article, around 5,000 people is what they included. And so allegedly they wanted to see whether the stereotype that men are funnier than women was true. Now, what they wrote in Psychology Today was that this stereotype is shared by both men and women, but of course, just because it exists does not mean it's true. So they looked into this study because of that. And what they did is, in a lot of these tests, what they did is they'd go, okay, here's a picture, and they gave it to non-comedians. So that's what they tried to do to make sure that it wasn't. And they had women and men write a caption, and then they gave the photos with the captions to other human beings and allowed them to determine which were funnier. And it said that 63% of the men were funnier than the women. Now, my problem with this study, along with the fact that I'm annoyed that they even did it, because I think there are much other things there. I think that it's a very biased study, even from the get-go of the way that they're deciding to do it. But I do think it's interesting because then when you look at the results and the particular researchers and what they were saying about the study is that they then said it's not that men are always funnier. Like, there are some very funny women, but they're saying that it was an anthropological thing that ended up happening because men were encouraged to be funny as a mating tool.
I know.
Here's my question for these Welsh academics.
Right.
Why won't this topic in question die?
Right.
Well, can we just get back? I can't get over. I read it in I read the whole thing in Psychology Today.
Yes.
Why would men have a higher humor ability than women on average? Is it possible that the view that women are less funny is so pervasive that societal forces discourage girls and women from developing and expressing their humor?
Yes.
Making a woman less likely to be perceived as funny.
And that's the part.
Perceived
Because
as
I think
funny.
not only that, I think the society has not only changed it so that what a woman says is less likely to be perceived as funny, but they've also created a particular variety of what is considered funny. And so it's a male bias lens already.
I'm going to say this.
Yep.
Women who undertake the heavier costs of reproduction, pregnancy, breastfeeding are choosier than men when selecting mate. But here's the thing. Take Ali Wong, who was like Baby Cobra, who has that whole stand-up. She's pregnant. She talks about being pregnant, breastfeeding, having a baby.